Well, hello and welcome to our November Data Working Group meeting. For those of you who are returning, this is our fourth monthly meeting of the 21-22 school year. For those of you who this is your first meeting, we're really excited to have you joining us, especially for today's topic. This month, we'll be touching on a topic that involves data privacy. And as you all know, the security and protection of our student and staff data is of utmost importance. Today, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into some of the rules and regulations underlying schools' use of personally identifiable information, or PII. These regulations and rules are collected under Education Law 2D. And so many of you have maybe been aware of some of these rules under Education Law 2D. And today, we have the opportunity to gain a bit more perspective on some of these rules. So I'm grateful to be joined today by Jason Clark, who has given a version of this presentation to several schools and at different conferences across the state. There's a really informative orientation on the law. And I think it will also help narrow the focus for our schools on what is necessary and how to prioritize tackling compliance in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and just introduce Jason Clark so he can begin. Jason Clark started his educational career in the classroom as an earth science teacher for 10 years. Over the past 10 years, he has worked closely with educators around the central New York region, helping to integrate technology into the classroom, and is currently the Model Schools Coordinator at the OCM BOCES. Recently, he has taken on the leadership role for the RIC 1 Data Privacy and Security Service at the CNY RIC, and Jason has been supporting over 30 districts in the central New York region navigating Ed Law 2D and the Part 121 regulation. So following his presentation, there'll be an opportunity for you all to ask questions and to gain a little bit more follow-up on these rules. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over now to Jason.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here to chat with everyone about Ed Law 2D. I just want to also say that we have Madeline Romano on the call with us, and she's going to be kind of helping me with this presentation, jumping in. Madeline works for the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center, and she's kind of the lead on the RIC 1 Data Privacy and Security Service that we have. I'm going to share my presentation here. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So a little bit about RIC 1 before we get into the law itself. Just wanted to share that the RIC 1 team that we have is all 12 regional information centers across the state. So a regional information center, for those of you that don't know, basically there's in New York State, there's regional information centers and there's BOCES. The 12 regional information centers really are responsible for the technology in the school districts and having networks up and running and devices and everything like that. Over the past number of years, RIC 1 has developed a data privacy and security service for our component districts, and those the 12 RICs that are working together currently, we are supporting 549 districts, and I think that number actually might be a little bit higher now. But what we offer is an opportunity for districts to be able to navigate Ed Law 2D. We have a large team of folks at the at that RIC 1 team, and as part of the service, we have a few different tools that I'll touch on during this presentation. And if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to your regional information center in the area, because many of the regional information centers can work with charter schools. I also want to point out that I am not a very structured presenter. So this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. Madeline's going to be looking at the chat. And so if you have any questions, please jump in and ask those questions. And I'm more than willing to answer anything you are concerned about or have questions about around Ed Law 2D. Before I get into the actual formal presentation, I wanted to show you this website. This is our RIC 1 website, and the way this service is set up is we have both paid for and free resources for districts in New York State. So if you go to ric1dpss.org and go to the resources tab, everything in this page is open to any school district in New York State that wants to learn more about EdLaw 2D. And the one document that I really want to highlight and point out is under the new section here, this data protection and planning document. There are numerous documents in that resources section, but I really feel that this document in particular is very well done and very informative. So if you're to, if you're a paper person and want to print something out and have it next to your computer, or you want to bookmark this page, this EdLaw 2D data protection and planning document is a very useful resource. And this is actually the document that I pulled a lot of the pieces for my presentation today. But as you look through this, it highlights the main sections of EdLaw 2D and the Part 121 regulations, and looks at each different piece of the regulations. Am I muted now?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, we just lost the audio for a second. If you don't mind just picking up, sorry about that.
Okay, you got me now?
Yeah, I think we're having a little bit of choppiness on your microphone. Is there a way to increase the volume for your microphone to catch? I just want to make sure that everybody can hear you clearly.
Yep, let me. There we go. How's that?
That's a lot better, yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So yeah, this document really walks you through the different parts of the law. So with EdLaw 2D, this is something that has been in place for a number of years. So EdLaw 2D originally was brought to the forefront to really focus on protecting student information. So, the main reason for the law is to make sure that the kids we have in our classrooms are as protected as they can be around their personally identifiable information being taken, stolen, because many of the students in our classrooms wouldn't know that their information was stolen until it was many years later, till they went to maybe apply for a mortgage or a house or something like that. So the law was put into place 6 years ago, and then only recently, last January, were the regulations put in place. The Part 121 regulations have many different parts, and those different parts focus on different areas of protecting student information and protecting the environment that information is being stored at the school level. So this presentation is, basically a top 10 things around EdLaw 2D that every district should know and be aware of. So the first one is understanding how EdLaw 2D treats student information. So we're all very familiar with FERPA, which is a federal regulation that's been in place for many, many years. And traditionally speaking, in my realm, in the BOCES and the New York State public school system, FERPA has always been treated as, there was directory information. That directory information could be shared fairly openly, and districts, could share that directory information. What EdLaw 2D did is they pointed to FERPA for the definition of what personally identifiable information is. And with that, they took that, what traditionally would be directory information, and put restrictions on it. So under Ed Law 2D, anything that you see here on my screen is considered protected information. So student first and last name is under FERPA directory information, under Ed Law 2D is now considered protected information. So that, along with any other piece of information, really needs to be protected under Ed Law 2D. And so that's one thing that I've really had to work with my districts to explain, is that, yes, I know we've always treated directory information like it was, but now it's a little different because of Ed Law 2D.
Jason, I'm just going to interrupt
Yep.
for a second.
Go ahead.
One of the things that we've gotten as feedback back from state ed about directory information is it's not so much the data element itself, they all, but how the data are being used determines whether or not it could be considered directory information. So if you're having, a website and you have the wrestling team on there, having the student's first name is protected data. But if it's just being used to show that they're part of a team, then that's acceptable. But if their data was being passed to an organization that will market to wrestling equipment, then it's considered protected. So it's the data elements themselves and also how they are being used in combination that determines whether or not something's directory.
Right. And, I'm glad you bring that point up. The spirit of the law, if laws have spirits, the spirit of the law is really to protect large scale data dumps of student information. Sending spreadsheets of student information to vendors and then having those spreadsheets or that chunk of data taken by malicious actors is really the focus of it. The state has said that they're not looking for districts to not be able to post things like honor roll lists and achievements of students and things like that. It's more for that protection of large scale theft of data. And I will give Michael a link to this presentation so everyone can go back and reference it. And you'll notice that on each of these slides, I have a little box down in the bottom corner here that has some links for each one of these top 10. So these link back to that resource page that I originally showed you and gives you specific information about each one of these things. As part of Ed Law 2D, there's a thing called the Parents' Bill of Rights and Supplemental Information. What this Parent Bill of Rights does is it actually outlines exactly, what districts are allowed to and not allowed to do with the student information and what data is collected, what data is protected. And every one of the districts and every one of the public school districts in New York State have this Parent Bill of Rights and supplemental information that need to be, again, as part of Ed Law 2D, it's required to be posted to the website because there is a component of these regulations that really focus on having parents be aware of where their student information is going and how it's being used. So the Parent Bill of Rights and supplemental information being posted to the school's website so that the community can easily find that is part of those regulations. And that really allows them to understand how their students' information is being used. There are templates for the Parents' Bill of Rights. If you were to look at many of the school districts in the state and look at their Parent Bill of Rights, you'll see a similarity between most of them. There is a template that's being used that they're not unique to each district. It's something that most are very, very similar. And along with this, the Parent Bill of Rights needs to be part of that agreement with the vendor. Anytime a district is sending student information to a vendor, there needs to be the Parent Bill of Rights and supplemental information attached to that contract and signed. So that's really what makes the vendor compliant with EdLaw 2D, and that's important. There also needs to be, again, as part of the regulations, every district needs to have a board policy in place around data security and privacy. That policy needs to be approved by the board. It needs to look at pieces of, this is more focused on infrastructure in many cases, and looks at things like the Nist cybersecurity framework alignment and how that data is being used, and that also, that policy needs to be posted to the website. And again, this is not a unique document in many cases. The state has provided a kind of a template that many districts are using, but it does have to go to the board and be approved.
Jason, Michael did mention in the chat that the association has a template for building a parent's bill of rights and a data privacy plan. There's
perfect.
also for, I don't know whether charter schools are part of, what do we call them again, Jason? Policy boards. There's like a policy board or contract consortium that has these as well. So between what you have from your association, the website that Jason mentioned, and also if you belong to a policy service, there's lots of these policies that you can just take and adapt and adopt by your board.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not sure if any of you folks are part of the Erie One policy service, but the Erie One, if you are, they do have that policy. But like I said, it's fairly universal and a template that's if you started looking around at public school websites, you'd see that many of their privacy policies are similar in nature. So another big part, I know this was, this talk is mainly originally focused on PII, which is a part of EdLaw 2D. But another large part of that, which then affects how the PII is shared and stored and things like that, is work around the Nist cybersecurity framework. So as part of EdLaw 2D, every district is expected to try to align themselves with the Nist cybersecurity framework. And as part of the service at each of these RICs, the Nist cybersecurity framework, we do have a tool that allows districts to self-assess and monitor how they're doing with Nist. If you're not aware what Nist is, I'm going to pop over here to see if I can get this out of the way. There we go. So if you're not aware of what the Nist cybersecurity framework is, this is a federal framework that the federal government put together to look at the main parts of data privacy and security, and really how to make an organization as secure as possible. The analogy I use, it's like, making bit taller walls in your castle and putting a moat around your castle and pulling up the drawbridge. So you're looking at ways to really look at each part of your organization and make it more robust and secure against outside attacks. Because in the recent years, public education and education in general has really been targeted by these malware attacks and bad actors trying to get in, and whether it's ransomware, malware, stealing of data, they're really trying to poke holes in our systems to get access to some of that information, whether it is for data or for, basically extortion of money. Each of these sections, so we have the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And like I said, there are 108 different parts of the Nist. The identify part of the Nist, and this is just one example of what it looks like. So in the identify section, we have categories and then subcategories. So the first part of the identify is asset management, and it's looking at how devices are being, how they're being used, stored, inventoried. And each one of these sections, there is a rubric where you're able to take a look at that part of the Nist and self-assess to see, where you are. You'll see that there's this level 3 is in blue. At the state level, we have determined and said that, this is adequate for a education entity in New York State. Obviously, getting up to a level 4 is awesome. But if you're able to get to a level 3, that's a good place to be. Along it, in this tool, we also have a place for evidence and action plan, and then we have a history of everything that's been done around each of these pieces. So districts now are starting to look at the Nist and really starting to go through and self-assess. And you'll see that we have a gap analysis here, and there's reporting. This isn't something that you're ever able to be done with, really. It's a constant process of going through, evaluating, updating, and trying to, become more, to reduce your gap analysis as much as possible. So you have, ones and zeros rather than negative ones and negative twos. Currently, as part of the law, districts don't have to report any of this out to the state. The state does not have a reporting system in place yet for the NIST cybersecurity framework. I do personally believe that, they will eventually. Every year there is a thing called the NCSR, the National Cybersecurity Review, that runs from October to December, and the state seems to be like kind of aligning themselves with that NCSR. And what that is essentially an exam, if you will, around how you're doing with the Nist. So what I've told my districts is that, the work that you're doing around Nist, and if you're using a tool similar to this, these are your notes that you're taking during the school year. And then the NCSR, if that were ever to be made mandatory, would be the Regents exam at the end of the year, your final exam, where you would take these notes that you've taken and you would then plug them into that exam at the end of the year. None of that is official or, in place right now, but I do see a trend towards some sort of reporting around Nist. So really starting to, to understand that's what a lot of districts in our area are starting to work on and starting to look at to become, obviously more compliant with Ed Law 2D. Well, under Ed Law 2D, there is only 2 ways for vendors to be compliant with the law. If you have vendors reaching out to you and they say, oh, don't worry, we're Ed Law 2D compliant, no problem. We're Ed Law 2D compliant, no problem. There is no way for a vendor to make themselves Ed Law 2D compliant. The way the law is written, there are only 2 ways to become compliant with the law. One is if a district enters into an agreement directly with the vendor, when that vendor then signs off on the school's Parents' Bill of Rights and supplemental information, and is then, that will make that vendor compliant. The other way that our districts are becoming compliant with the law is if they purchase through a COSER at a BOCES or Regional Information Center. And when that happens, the BOCES and the RIC, the Regional Information Centers, enter into the contract on behalf of the district. And so if they buy it through a COSER, they're all set. With that, you know, it's definitely a confusing point that people aren't, you know, the vendors are confused by this too, but it's really the onus of the district to prioritize and have contracts in place. It's not the vendor's responsibility. So that's that. So yep, please. Yeah.
So Michael, this is actually a question out to you. Do the charter schools have any type of like contract consortium for purchasing software? Or does every charter school go directly to the vendors?
Typically, it's the latter case. So I think we discussed this a little bit before the call, but you know, those procurement decisions are typically happening at the individual LEA level. Mm-hmm. So, you know, in some cases, there are larger networks of charters where this might be centrally procured. And so maybe the CMO is managing that contractual relationship, you know, with the vendor when they buy on behalf of the network. But it's also the case that individual schools, you know, when they are using some of these services, they are the ones who are signing the contract. And so it's incumbent upon them to add those supplemental pieces in the parent privacy policy, or the parent bill of rights, I should say, into the contract language.
And are charter schools eligible to purchase software through a BOCES or a regional information center, or that's not an option for them?
Up to now, I believe that has been a limited opportunity. I don't know if anybody on the call can, you know, talk about a different example, but my understanding is that it's not the typical case.
Yeah, so then that means that as Jason Clark was saying, this is up to every charter school person who is engaging in a contract with a vendor. You need to make sure that the contract has all of the elements of Ed Law 2D in the contract, that they'll sign your parents' bill of rights and provide the supplemental information. So the links that Jason has over here, the toolkit and the planning guide, have check sheets that you can use to help you facilitate that process. Back to you, Jason.
I do just want to actually correct what I said. I'm one of my colleagues here at the association. Correct me. There is an opportunity to purchase through the BOCES, but they don't get reimbursed for that, like some of the districts do for those costs. So there is some level of procurement that can happen, but that would then also be an expenditure for the school. They're just paying for it through the BOCES. I think in that case, then it would seem that they'd be under that closer relationship, but you know, they're just paying for the service.
Right, they'll just have to check then with their BOCES to see, because sometimes BOCES buy through the contract consortium, as Jason mentioned, and then sometimes they buy direct. So you just want to make sure that their contracts are compliant as well.
Also, maybe not the most competitive price, but I think individual schools can make that assessment.
All right, there's a question in the comments says, this part of the law does not seem realistic given that Google, PowerSchool, and others do not allow for separate agreements with each school. Yes, I would agree with you that this is a totally unreasonable part of the regulation. And as a group, Jason knows we're going to state ed, constantly appealing to state ed for some type of, you know, state approved vendor list or something. And we just keep getting the response that New York State provides local decision-making authority for charter schools, parochial schools, public schools, and therefore the state will not make decisions on their behalf, which doesn't make sense. Everybody has to follow the same laws. So I don't know what to tell you on that one.
Yeah, I continually hope for a amendment to fix. There are a couple things that keep coming up, but you know, this is where we are right now, and you know, I'm hoping that you know that changes at some point. You'll notice that I have here the in the yellow box. So I'm not going to jump into the inventory tool, but I'll just explain it real quick. As part of the regulations, you do have to post your software inventory. Like I said, there's a large component of EdLaw 2D that requires districts to be very transparent with their communities so that they know where the information is going. And as part of that transparency, every district is required to post a inventory and documentation of compliance with EdLaw 2D. So what that means is a list of tools that you're using that collect student information. So the law isn't designed to prevent districts from working with vendors. It's just putting the contract in place so that we know that the data is going someplace secure. And you're not just sending it to some random company that you don't know that they have the safeguards in place. So as part of the regulations, there also needs to be an inventory, and that needs to be posted to the website so folks can see that the contracts in place and what companies are actually collecting that information. So another part of the regulations is that all employees need to be trained annually. And you'll notice that it says employees, not teachers. All employees that have any access to student information are required to be trained annually around the laws, both federal and state. So namely FERPA and EdLaw 2D. So that annual training, it doesn't really specify what that training has to be. We have training modules set up in our system that our districts that are participating in the service can use. But I do know that districts are using different means of educating their employees on the laws in place. So like it was listed here in the best practices, the EdLaw 2D, the FERPA, the COPA, and the PPRA. Those are all things that any district employee really needs to be made aware of. And it can be done in a group setting. Our training modules are asynchronous. There's 3 different modules. One is specifically around the law, and the other 2 are around best practices and identifying threats. So, it really depends on what your district is using, but that is part of the regulations, is that the employees need to be trained regularly. So when I say employees, anyone that has access to student information. So in most cases, it'd be everyone maybe except for custodial or grounds crew. But, you've got cafeteria worker, there are a lot of folks that are in the organization that are non-teachers that still have access to student information and need to be made aware of what the law is and what it says. So, like I've said a few times, the districts need to be very transparent with their communities, and there needs to be a procedure in place for a parent, guardian, someone in the community that maybe feels that their student's information has been compromised. The regulations apply. They basically require districts to have a system in place where someone can come and lodge a complaint, or let the district know that they feel their students' information has been compromised and been breached. Some districts make it a Google form and put it on their webpage. Some districts say you have to come into the office and fill out a formal form at the district office or the building office, main office, to file a concern that their students' information has been basically compromised. Once that happens, the district has to have a means in place to follow up with that and dig into whether that student's information actually has been compromised, and then confirm with the person that made the complaint that yes or no. If they do find from one of these complaints that there was actually a data breach, then that needs to be taken to the next level and reported to state ed. And so that they're aware that there has been a data breach, and then there's a system of steps in place and processes after that concern is given to Albany to state ed. So just like we do fire drills and God forbid that there's ever a fire in the building, we want all the kids to be able to get out safely. Districts need to be aware that it's really in this point in time not a matter of if, but when you have a data breach, a cybersecurity attack, something like that. It's something that we hope never happens. We don't do fire drills because we hope the building catches on fire. We do fire drills so that the kids can get out safely. We're to a point now with the attacks and things like that districts really should put together a data security team, a cybersecurity team, call it what you will, that meet on a regular basis and discuss some of these things and actually go through scenarios. There are many what they're called tabletop activities out there that you can do a Google search for cybersecurity tabletop activities, and there are many out there. And actually walk through the process. Sit everyone down and be like, okay, it's 1 o'clock on a Friday, and the building principal just gets an email from one of the teachers that they clicked on a link in their email, and all of a sudden their screen went crazy, and now there's a clock ticking down saying that they have to pay, $30,000 or else they're gonna, whatever. So, things like that are a reality, and just ignoring them doesn't make you ready for when they happen. All it does is makes you chaotic when it does happen. So you need to sit down with that security team and really, talk about what do we do next? Who do we contact? Have those numbers written down and be aware of, what exactly you need to do. Each district is different. Each building is different. And, you really need to kind of look at where you are and what your personnel are, what personnel are available. In a lot of these cases, time is of the essence with some of these things. And you really need to have a purposeful approach to what to do next. If there is, like it says here in the reporting requirements, there are requirements to report things to state ed. But then you also may need to get law enforcement involved. I know it's crazy to be calling the FBI and saying, this happened, but it is to that point where there needs to be a notification if something like this happens. So those fire drills are very important. So for managing all this, there needs to be a quarterback in place to help organize the field of play for all of this stuff around EdLaw 2D. So there needs to be a data protection officer for all of our public schools. There needs to be a data protection officer identified. That person really varies in who they are. It could be, I have data protection officers that are vice principals in the high school, all the way up to superintendents in the district. So, and everyone in between. A lot of times it does fall to the director of technology, but I have many assistant superintendents, business officials. It really is a very diverse group of folks that fall into this data protection officer title, but they can't do it themselves. They're really there to just help manage the process and bring the people together.
Jason, I just wanted to jump in. I did a survey down in my region of data protection officers and what other titles they hold in their organization. I have 62 districts at Lower Hudson, and there's only one district out of the 62, where the DPO, that's their only job. And that was, and the rest of them are a combination, as you said, of directors of technology, of chief information officers. It runs the gamut, but there's only one person who's fortunate enough to only have this job, and they're way ahead of all the other districts in my, because that's all they do. So I know Michael was saying that most of the folks on this call are the DPOs for their charter school, but you have a lot of other hats too. So the motto that we use is that progress is compliance. And as Jason said, you will never finish this. This is an ongoing thing. But as long as you're making progress towards fulfilling some of these requirements, that's what is considered compliance along the way.
Right, and that leads into my last, the number 10 slide. This isn't something that you're able to, if you're a big fan of checklists, this isn't something that you're going to be able to check off and complete. I say that, and I have a column here on the right that says complete. Some of them you're going to be able to say, okay, those are, at least we have by complete, I see this as being a process in place to continue to monitor. You're completing a process, not the task. So this is a marathon, not a sprint. Anytime I have heard from Albany that, around anything around Ed Law 2D, the line that I've heard numerous times is you need to be doing something. Doing nothing isn't an option. You can't just stick your head in the sand and ignore what's going on. But at the same time, there's no expectation that you're going to be done with this. It's a continual monitoring. The bad actors out there are continuing to evolve. We need to continue to evolve and have safeguards in place. It's scary, but it's the reality. You can't, just because it's scary doesn't mean you cannot, address it and take action on it.
And actually, the only two deadlines that state ed had given that were concrete deadlines was, the first one was that by July 1st of, I think it was 2020, you had to have a data protection officer appointed in your district or your school. And then the second deadline was also supposed to be originally July 1st, about having your district-wide or your school-wide data protection policy ratified by your board. Originally it was July 1st, and with COVID, they moved it to October 1st, 2020. So if you don't have that data privacy policy in place, that should be the first thing that you're working on.
I'll just add here, I'm just jumping real quickly from the charter school perspective. I mean, we at the association did an audit of schools that have designated a DPO, and the vast majority of charter schools have done that. They're the DPO listed or registered. Mm-hmm. So as Madeline points out, the other sort of really big prioritization right now is to make sure you have that data protection policy or data privacy policy in place and your parent bill of rights posted to your website. And as Madeline and Jason have said, there are resources for that. In addition to the association having sort of a plug and play version of that, obviously you'll want to modify it for your school, but those templates exist. And I'll drop a link in the chat to access our members only resources. Please feel free to do that. It is available only to members, but many of the people on this call are members. So I'll drop that link in so you have access to those resources.
So I do want to open it up for questions. That's that's the top 10 things that I that I feel really everyone should know. And just to give you a little behind the scenes of that top 10 list, there are 9 regulations, and those first 9 things are basically the regulations made into just a top 10 list. So those first 9 slides are the part 121 regulations, the 9 parts to that. So if you're working on those, that's good.
The question in the chat, can you speak to the federal money to help protect school districts from cyber attacks and ransomware that has been on the news yesterday? I did not hear that one yet. Jason, did you hear anything about that yet?
I have not, no. That would be new information that I have not. It came out yesterday.
That's what it says in the chat. I didn't hear anything about that, so it's definitely something we have to look into. Whoever, Karen, who posted that, do you have anything that you can share with us that you heard about it? I don't know if she can unmute herself or if you feel comfortable. Anything?
Hi, everybody. It was on the news last night, and then I Googled it. It's coming out of the federal infrastructure monies. They were speaking about how Nassau County schools seem to be a target for cyber attacks, and hot off the press. That's all I know, other than what I've Googled. There is a Schumer in the Daily News on it, but I have no other information. Then I have one other question. We've been going through all of our contracts, which seem to be invoices. So now I have to go back and check on every contract. Is it a yearly contract that they have to sign, or does a past contract that includes it? Some contracts that I've looked at, like Schoolment, for example, has language in, we went back to them and asked them, and they said that they had a policy, but I still have to go back to them to have them sign off on a Bill of Rights and supplemental Bill of Rights. So, so I'm aware of that. And then the last question that I have is, when we contacted our insurance for the charter school, they had said that we should be asking the vendors who would have PI information to sign a liability, to have liability insurance to cover us. I mean, I think that's a big ask, but we were wondering your opinion.
So as far as the length of the contract, they don't necessarily have to be annual. They just have to be, there has to be a set time. So I know that some of the contracts at the state level through Area 1 are 3-year contracts because they're specified as 3-year contracts. So it really comes down to, specification of what they're signing off on. I haven't really heard of many that are longer than 3 years to be reevaluated. As far as requiring the vendors to have liability insurance, I don't know that you have the, it's always, you can always ask.
It's hard to get, you can't get the supplemental sign, let alone.
Right. Yeah. So I think having that would be that'd be a pretty far reach.
But there are requirements in the supplemental information about the vendor will ensure that subcontractors are following regulations and so on. So if you take a look at the model data protection agreement that Jason pointed out on the resources page, that addresses some of those things. It doesn't get into cyber insurance, but it does get into what the things the vendors have to do. And just an aside for the cyber insurance piece, a lot of the cyber insurance companies are now requiring districts and schools to move to like multi-factor authentication when using software. So that's something to be aware of as well, because they're raising up insurance premiums for organizations that don't have multi-factor authentication, because they're viewing that as a way of securing the networks. So just something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I just came from the statewide technology conference in Rochester, NYCSA, and that was a very big topic, was the multi-factor authentication. Really, what districts are being pushed into now, because of the cybersecurity insurance companies, they're not willing to write the cybersecurity insurance unless at least the adults in the organization have multi-factor authentication, whether it's a key fob or biometrics, or a text message to the cell phone, some other form of two-factor authentication to log in.
There's another question. Are there helpful links for running data privacy trainings with staff members?
So there, I don't have any right here at my fingertips, but I do know that the federal education department has some resources around those fire drills that I talked about. The tabletop activities. They have a couple listed on their website. As far as data privacy training specifically, I do have a video that I put together that is designed for teachers around understanding what PII is, and I can send that to Michael. If it's a video I put together. It's not anything part of the service or anything like that. It's just a video that I created specifically around what PII is, and I'd be happy to share that.
And there are other, if you go on the resources tab I put the link in ric1dpss.org, and then you go to resources under the category for annual employee training. It does list what needs to be included if you're going to do your own training. And then some people go to YouTube, there's lots of resources. I don't know whether or not you folks use something like Global Compliance Network or Safe Schools, but those kind of canned training modules that schools are required to do, like bloodborne pathogens and so on, they have modules around data privacy and cybersecurity. You just have to make sure you pick all 3 or 4 of them.
I'll also just add, the association has put together a asynchronous training for staff that is Ed Law 2D compliant. It's actually in that section of the resource center that I just uploaded. This is available to members to access this asynchronous training. It's a module video that you can either distribute to staff to watch, or you can have them watch in a collaborative group setting. But feel free to click on that link with the resources, and we will grant access to those member schools to have access to this resource.
All right, another question. Oh, I think that was the one that Karen asked before about cyber insurance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, with that, are there any last questions? I know we're coming to the top of the hour. This has been some great questions here in the chat. Otherwise, I do want to thank Jason. I want to thank Madeline. Thank you so much for your insights and your experience and your tips for helping to navigate Education Law 2D. As Jason and Madeline mentioned, I will post this presentation with its links to our resource center. You can access the Data Working Group Resource Center, where you'll find the recording for this session, as well as the presentation links. With about 5 minutes left in the call today, I just want to highlight a few upcoming events and notifications. I will mention we will not be having a December monthly data working group meeting in December, just because of the winter break holiday. We typically meet on the 4th Tuesday of each month, and that puts us squarely within the holiday break. So we will actually be having our next meeting on January 25th at 10 a.m. That session is going to be around student information systems. We're going to have an opportunity for schools to share a little bit about their student information systems. It'll be a collaboratively facilitated meeting. If you are interested in sharing about which school information system you have and would like to participate as a sort of a presenter in that, you have strong feelings about your current one, or you have questions about a school information system, if you don't mind completing clicking on the link. See here, I'll resend that link. I apologize. If you don't mind, you can click on the form that I just dropped into the chat so that you can sign up to share a little bit about your student information system. Finally, we are also in the midst of our ESSA Financial Transparency Office Hours. We are holding 2 more sessions to help schools navigate this required reporting, which is due on December 31st. The link to register for these office hours, I'm dropping into the chat as well. The dates for the remaining 2 office hours are November 29th and December 13th. And those office hours will give people the opportunity have questions answered about completing the ESSA financial transparency reports. We have representatives from SUNY and from SED who can answer your specific questions. So those are some of the upcoming data working group opportunities, and we look forward to seeing you at them as well. So once again, please let us know if you have any questions. Please check out our resource center for these materials, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.